I mean, look, there's nothing really much else to say about the event. Yair Rodriguez defeated Brian Ortega. Via injury, TKO injury at 4-11 in the first round. Show Ortega dislocating his shoulder.
His legs. This is great for Brian. Yeah, this is great for Brian. Brian wants to grab. Oh,
what happened?
His shoulder popped out.
Oh, no.
His shoulder popped out.
Oh, look at him celebrating. It's so. Pause it. Remember when they faulted Chris Weidman for celebrating when Anderson Silva like shattered his leg in half?
I do remember that, yes.
And people were like, dude, why are you celebrating that? It's not a real victory.
So if history is
was more of a real victory than this. This was like...
If history is any lesson, Yair Rodriguez will dislocate his shoulder later in his career.
Yes, that is true.
And then realize it's kind of a freak thing.
It was very anticlimactic. It wasn't even like off of like a crazy exchange or like some sort of like...
It was a freak thing.
Yeah.
That, probably, as at least my understanding with these things, probably a pre-existing thing. Usually once someone's had a dislocated shoulder, they end up being more susceptible to dislocating their shoulder more often. At least I know that with just like lots of people who have had that happen to them, and then it happens several times. Yeah. You've had that happen to you several times.
I've had my shoulder dislocated 2 times now.
Which sucks. It's a freak thing. It's not like he caught him in the submission. I know people are saying, like, look, he was going for a submission and it popped a joint out. Okay, but still, it was a freak thing. It was sad because it's a really interesting fight, and it was shaping up to be a really interesting fight. Yair Rodriguez landed some good stuff on the feet. Mm-hmm. Then Ortega took him down, and it was like, oh shit, let's see what he can do to him here on the ground. And then the fight, just like that, it's over.
Very
really too bad.
Very anticlimactic. Sucks. According to Dana White, Rodriguez and Josh Emmett may face off in an interim title fight now with Alexander Volkanovski. He may need hand surgery. So I mean, look,
they really do. It's like you said that there's just no objective rule about when there's an interim title. You're like, so you just had Alexander Volkanovski in this place where you have a guy in Max Holloway who is head and shoulders above everyone else in the division, like head and shoulders above the rest of them, and then you have Volkanovski who's now head and shoulders above Max Holloway. Beat him easily. There's never been a more clear cut. This is the guy in the division. And now you're like, oh, let's have a fight for an interim title.
And by the way,
it just kind of sucks.
And if I'm going to get, I mean, look, I guess you can't really give it to Holloway, but wouldn't you just give it to Holloway just in terms of him genuinely being the next best guy in the division? He's got the win over Yair Rodriguez already, right?
The two guys
got the win over Brian Ortega.
The two guys in this main event, Yair Rodriguez, he soundly beat. Brian Ortega, he fucking, in an epic, like one of the greatest clinics ever put on in the octagon, beat. Emmett just barely survived against a guy, debatable who won that fight in Emmett's last fight.
Calvin Kattar?
Against Kattar.
Yeah, who?
Max Holloway wrecked.
Destroyed.
Like, just wrecked. So it's just one of those things.
If you're going to do the interim.
Now I get.
If you're going to do the interim, I would almost say throw it on Max's fucking waist.
I get it. He's had 3 fights with him, and the last one was the most decisive. There's not much of an appetite for a 4th fight, but now you're in this really shit situation where to put an interim belt on anyone else's waist is just. It might be the most meaningless.
Volk needs to just vacate the title. He has done enough at 145 where I think that he should just vacate the title and move up to 155 because the reality, first of all,
he kind of has to move up to 155 now. What the fuck?
Oliveira versus Volkanovski is crazy, and I think Volkanovski, I think he would handle him. I think Volkanovski would handle.
I would have before the Max Holloway fight said Oliveira is a big favorite in that fight. After the Max Holloway fight, you go, that's fucking interesting.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting fight.
Interesting. And look, then you let 145 sort of figure itself out.
But could Holloway go and be the champ now at 145 after 3 losses to the guy? Like, what would that mean at this point? I almost feel like he has to go to a different division and like do some other shit. I don't know. It's a weird situation.
It's actually, if you're the UFC, you kind of hate Volkanovski. You're like,
we're in the middle of the blessed era. And you just came in and fucked everything up, dude.
He really did. And it's just sort of like, what are you doing? He's clearing out a division multiple times over. It's a very unique position where the number one and number 2 guys are so like there's such a big difference between number 1 and number 2, and then number 2 to number 3 in the rest of the division, and then 3 to 10, it's sort of like a pick 'em, right? Like these guys can all just beat each other up, and it's great. Very interesting. Volkanovski, you gotta almost.
He's gotta move up. He has to
and
move
we
up.
talked about this on the last show. Maybe it was the show before. Or Triple C comes in, and that's the only other fight where, at the very least, you have this really crazy story, and you really want to see it. I still think Volkanovski wins that fight, but at the same time, that is at least an interesting storyline. Maybe that's the last thing for him left at 145. But beyond that, I'm just sort of done seeing it.
No, look, that's absolutely right. Look, Henry Cejudo at least has a story there where you go, okay, I still think Volkanovski is the big favorite after what he just did to Max Holloway. This is him going up a weight class. However, with Henry Cejudo, you can say you've got a gold medalist, the guy who stopped Demetrius Johnson in his prime, who is widely considered to be the best pound-for-pound MMA fighter ever, and the guy who knocked out TJ Dillashaw and then came up and won TJ Dillashaw's title, a weight class above. Okay, there's at least like, I'm buying that. Let's see this fight. Other than that, I think Volkanovski has to move up to 155. I don't really think there's much of another option. No. I mean, what do you want to see? He already beat Ortega. He already fucking, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't really
There's nobody else. Yeah, there's nobody else there. I don't want to see it. It is a very interesting time for the high level UFC guys. The expectation to sort of get multi-division championships, the expectation to fight the best across other divisions. It's wild. Like what these guys got to do today versus what they even had to do 5 years ago and where it was. The evolution of the sport is really, really crazy.